Hi, everybody. I have my really good friend, Rob Galbraith, and I bet I butchered your name, but that's okay.
It's all
Or
good.
at least I hope you think it's okay. You can butcher my name next. We'll just,
I
settle
will.
the
Yeah.
odds there. We actually both wrote books pretty recently, and Rob's book is about technology in the insurance field, and he has my book too. And mine's about unlocking the potential of women in insurance. So we thought it would be really fun to share with the world why we wrote our books and why we think they're important, and give you a little bit of insider's view on it. So I wanted to start off with what your inspiration and why you wrote your book, Rob.
Yep. So Sarah Muniz, good to see you. Thank you. Congrats. I probably butchered
Thank
your
you.
last name too. So we're even. But no, just a quick background for folks that aren't familiar with me. I've got 25 years in the insurance industry. I born and raised in Michigan, got an econ degree, worked at the Federal Reserve out of college, moved to San Antonio, Texas in 1988. So Sarah and I are fellow Texans. She's North Texas, I'm South Texas, and had the good fortune of catching on with USA and spent almost 20 years there. 15 in the underwriting department, 10 in a leadership position. And USA, many people know it. It's a large property and casualty insurer, primarily does personal lines, although they just branched out into commercial lines, and they serve military members and their families. And I mention all that because if you think about it, actually, the military is a very demanding customer. They move around all the time. They may be deployed. They may not have a lot of time. They may be in a place where they're really not connected or barely connected in terms of, one bar of service or whatever. And so how do you serve the needs of that kind of active duty military member? And USA has just kind of been laser focused on that for decades now. And that's led to a lot of innovation. And guess what? If you're able to kind of serve that really demanding type customer, then the vast majority of people that actually maybe don't know this actually didn't serve in the military. They may be the children or the grandchildren of somebody they did, and that's how they were able to become eligible for USA membership. So just kind of really focused on that, really kind of had this culture and ethos of innovation. So it led me to write my book from the experiences that I had seeing how our industry was changing. And I really wanted to kind of share that with the world, both career insurance professionals such as myself, to let them know, hey, actually, I think our industry is changing a lot more rapidly than it has been in the past, as well as I had so many folks from outside the industry, technologists, entrepreneurs, investors, that they wanted to change the insurance industry, but they didn't know some of the more basic things. They didn't know like what claims frequency was or claim severity was or whatnot. So I have a glossary. It's kind of an insurance 101. And so that was really the motivation. And my book came out in February of 2019. And I've just been really blessed. It's just done phenomenally well and led to just a ton of opportunities to speak on this kind of insurtech wave and transformation and insurance all around the globe. And you and I connected then, and
We
you
did.
were kind enough to lead one of the very first reading group that we ever had. And so I know we had some early conversations way back then, even that you had a book in yourself and you were really focused on your experiences in the insurance industry. And I know you talk about undiscovered voices and particularly your experiences as a woman, and I know you've had many others over the years kind of share their experiences, and you were able to kind of distill that into a wonderful book that just came out. And I think there's a common link and theme between the two, just about change in the industry and the need for change. So I would love to hear, Sarah, about kind of what led to you writing your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had never really gotten to know a book author, I guess, or someone who that I was like, this is a highly successful person with this awesome book that came out, when I had met you and saw your stuff on I think it was on LinkedIn, actually. I connected with you through Insurance Nerds. And so I was like super excited for you. And I didn't even know that I was going to have a book around the time that your book got released. But you inspired me. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm gonna try to do this too. And you shared kind of how you came up with like outlines and how you really would get going with the book. And so all that help just really helped me to get to where I am now and keep me going along the way. So I really appreciate that. And, you know, you never know like what you do that's going to inspire someone else to do something that they don't realize they have the ability to do. So I really appreciate that. It's my book is really about, like you said, about change. I'm hearing a common theme about how there's not enough talent and how we're having a hard time attracting talent. And yet there's so many talented women in the insurance industry, way more women than men, yet the women aren't moving up. And then I kind of like was getting frustrated because I was like, I don't understand. If I'm talented and everyone keeps telling me I'm a rock star, why am I hitting the same glass ceiling all the time, no matter where I go or what I do? They're like, Sarah, you're our #1 producer. You're so awesome. We love you. Wish we could have 100 of you. I'm like, okay, great. Let me manage a team. No, that's not for you, Sarah. You know, just keep selling some policies. And so that frustration is really what led me, because I was thinking, I was like, well, if people can't retire, if everyone's complaining that we don't have the talent, if technology, if everyone thinks, okay, the solution is just that AI will take over, which it won't, it has to work collaboratively with people, then our industry is not going to keep succeeding. We're just going to be an upward hill. There's going to be a lot of companies, a lot of agencies that aren't able to move into the future because they're not making changes. So I love that we found that commonality where you're saying, here's all the technology things that can help you. And I'm like filling in that gap with, okay, here's all the talent that you have. Now let's sandwich them together and make it happen. So I just, I think it's incredible that our two books kind of ended up working together in a sense that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think both uncover kind of some structural issues that have been around for a long time. And really there's a common theme between both of like, this can't continue as it always has in the past, right? There's just this compelling need for change within the industry. And I've told you this, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Sarah. So, you know, when I first became a people leader in 2010, probably at that time, about 70% of the underwriting department were women. I mean, and it was a vast majority. And these were some of the top people that had previously been in a customer service role or a claims role and others. Like you had to do well in a previous role, typically, to make it into the underwriting department at USA. It was kind of a step up. And we only had one female executive at the time. And I remember thinking like, okay, I know this is a terrible balance, but it'll get there over time. It's just, you know, the two-person household from the 70s, and, you know, women just weren't in the workforce before, but we've corrected that. And it's evidenced by the fact that now the department was a majority women. And so we'll see them more in management and leadership, and this will balance itself out in a decade. And while I'm happy to report that there were, you know, some women that were able to get a peer role to mine, like as a frontline manager, director, like the executive level, like it changed. It didn't change slowly. And even among my level, like it wasn't even 50-50, much less, you know, 70-30. And so I'm sure there were a lot of reasons for that, but it was very puzzling and very frustrating over time. And again, I know that you've lived it firsthand and talked to many people and done research about it. So, you know, what are some of those things that have traditionally kind of held women back in the industry?
You know, honestly, I think it's assumptions that sometimes leadership and management assumes that because women are in different stages of their lives, that maybe they don't want to take that next step up. And making an assumption without actually talking to that person, what do you see your future? Where would you like to go? How can I help you get to where you need to be, so that we're both utilizing your talent to its full potential? Because I think just like anybody, we like to always grow. I think it's important that everybody is always growing and trying to do better. And I think human nature, that's what we are always striving to do. So if you get stagnant in a position, and if people and management are just like, you know, she's pregnant, so she probably doesn't want to get into a leadership role. She probably just wants to spend more time with her family, or she has a senior in high school. She doesn't have time, or maybe she can't travel because she's a single mom. You don't know any of those things for certain until you have that conversation with someone. And for me personally, my conversations, I would actually start the conversations with my managers, and then they would finally just tell me, like, I would just keep asking them until they told me no. And then they would finally say, look, Sarah, we haven't been answering you because, you're not going to get to move up. We don't see you there. That's not where your path with our company is, which essentially made me move to a different company, to where I would think that I would have better opportunity. So for me, I think the biggest obstacles are lack of communication. I think the managers have to take a proactive approach to talk to everybody on their staff and make sure they're where they want to be. If they want to keep that talent, and then find out what they need to give them in order to get them to the next level of whatever their goals are. Maybe they don't even know that they have goals. Maybe you see something in that person they don't see in themselves. Because one of the obstacles in my book that I talk about is confidence. A lot of times women, we want to actually prove that we can do something before we do it, versus a lot of times men will think, I can do that, whether they know they can do it or not. And confidence and confidence are two completely different scenarios. Just because you're confident doesn't mean you're competent. And just because you're competent doesn't mean you're confident. And so I think there's a disconnect there too. So it's really giving the tools and the training and the open communication, removing some of those barriers, and don't make an ass out of yourself and assume. Because that's, like, I think one of the biggest problems is making those decisions for people without actually having the conversation.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I've had an employee that was super bright, super successful, and super ambitious. And she used to sit right outside the office of one of the top vice presidents. And so she always had made a point to say, good morning, good night, to interact with him throughout the day. And I know that she was making a really good impression on him. But she later wanted to be able to work from home. Her husband was having some health issues, and it just was better for her personal situation to be a work at home employee, which we offered our employees. But I know her main concern, this is, pre-pandemic, so it was more unusual, right, was that she'd be out of sight, out of mind, or somehow by saying that she wanted to work at home, that she had no interest in advancing. And I know that was something that I really kind of had to fight when I would talk with other people on the management team, to say, like, no, I know she's moved now to a full-time work at home, but don't take that as a signal of, oh, she used to be ambitious and she no longer, has that ambition. She's still just as ambitious. Another great advice I got as a male manager that really made me question some of my unconscious bias was, are you coaching your female employees the same way that you would coach a male employee? And I had another young woman that I had actually recruited to the firm. So I thought she was just amazingly bright and talented. And anytime I had a career conversation with her, she would say, I want to be the CEO of the company. And I'm sure the first 2 or 3 times I was like, okay, and I probably treated it as like well, that's nice. And I kind of almost moved past it, like didn't acknowledge it, didn't say, well, hey, you're at a point where you're a senior and maybe you'll make it to a lead or frontline manager. But if you want to be CEO, there's a whole lot more to that. And so here's some development opportunities that you need to have. And, it took 2 or 3 times of her saying that I, in getting that feedback, to say, you know what, if that was a male colleague, I might, because all the CEOs have previously been male, like I probably would be coaching that person harder and kind of giving them. And just because she was female and she was also a woman of color, like I wasn't necessarily maybe investing as much in her as I would have. Now, whether or not she'll ever be CEO one day, who knows? But that was my responsibility as a male leader, to coach her just like I would anyone else, right? A white male colleague that had the same ambition. So it definitely helped change my perspective. And I would I'd be nitpicky, right? I'd point out little things. If here's something you can improve, even in a meeting, like give her feedback right after of like, this is what you did well. Here's an area that I think you could improve. And I know sometimes maybe as a male manager, you might be uncomfortable giving some of that very specific female feedback to a female that's reporting to you, but it's so critical for the development. Of course, it needs to come from a good place, right? And I think that can be an issue as well, is that, hey, are you nitpicking me because you're putting me down, or is it that you are trying to build me up?
Right. Yeah. And definitely like career pathing and coaching and giving, step by step, okay, this is where you want to be, and it's way up here and you're maybe right here, but this is the next level, and this is how you get to, like what you said, this is how you get there. These are the people you network with. Advocacy and mentoring and all of those things that sometimes if somebody is similar to you, it's easier to coach, like it might be easier for me to mentor another female that reminds me of me. And it's kind of the same for men, like, okay, well, this guy kind of, I see a lot in him that I see in the CEO, or I see a lot in him that is similar to me. So he makes more sense in my head, although that diversity in thought may actually be what the company needs. And you're not presenting the same opportunities, like you said. And a lot of times women, they need that extra because you're not the only one thinking that, like just that middle manager is not the only one thinking that all the layers above are thinking it too. So then it's also your job to almost say like, hey, this is what I see. This is what I've been working with with this person, and advocate for them even like a step further. So I think all of that's really important. And I sometimes I think that, companies are like, well, I'm not stopping women from moving up. They just don't want to. Well, again, are you coaching? Are you assuming what's going on? And what's your ultimate goal? Are you wanting to foster that talent and get the most out of your culture and your people and attract new talent? Because talent wants to go where talent is. Talent wants to go where they can see other people excel that are similar to them. So if my daughter sees me doing really well in a career and super happy, she's more likely to want to follow in my footsteps versus my mom keeps pounding her head and I don't want to do that. I'm going to do something with that maybe is easier for me to excel in. So absolutely. And I think with the technology and freeing up talent to work with technology and teaching them more, and the next generation, like they're whizzes when it comes to technology. So if we get that next generation of women and men, and all Gen Z is all about social action, doing the right thing. They care more about that than money. So if we're showing them that we're doing the right things and we have the diversity, you're attracting male and female. You're attracting all sorts of people. So, and that's what we want. We need that diversity in order to keep us propelling forward and creating billion-dollar companies out there. So, absolutely.
Yeah, and I always tell people, I personally believe that efforts at diversity, equity, inclusion are important in their own right, just for the social good that they provide. I also argue that it's a business imperative. So even if you feel like, oh, that's just feel good stuff or whatever, it actually moves the bottom line as well. And the reason I say that is because innovation requires, by definition, new ways of thinking. And I even talk to companies about what I would distinguish between new and novel. I know in a previous life, I was running an innovation team, and the premium audit team came to me, right? And they're like, well, there's this new software package that we really want that would make our jobs a lot easier. And they knew everything about it. Like there was nothing innovative about it. It was just better than whatever old software they were using. And so I'd always distinguish between like new and novel. And I'd be like, just because it's new, like that actually doesn't make it innovative. It doesn't make it like risky or whatever. So when you're talking about something that's innovative, almost by definition, it is uncertain. It is risky. It is brand new, right? You're kind of in uncharted waters. And so to be successful, or to at least, there's always a risk of failure, anything you do that's innovative, but to help mitigate failure and to give your innovative ideas, projects, et cetera, the best chance of success, you really need to have a diverse group of voices, of perspectives, just kind of examining, like, is this the right thing? Are we headed in the right path? How can we mitigate risk? How can we make this new thing as
Thinking of
successful
all
as
the different
possible?
angles. Yeah.
All the different angles. And so people of
Mhm.
different backgrounds are proven that they're going to have like a more diverse way of thinking rather than kind of that group think, right? If we all have a similar background, we all have similar experiences, we've all been the company the same line, guess what? We're going to kind of think alike and we're going to have blind spots. And so we're not going to see like why something might not be a good idea or why it needs to be, changed a certain way to make sure that it's successful. So we keep talking about innovation, we keep talking about technology, but yet we're not always investing just in the diversity of our talent and really the inclusion, right? And I think maybe there's been more focus on the diversity part, but less on the inclusion part. And I think you talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the inclusion is, it's all about culture and making sure those people are having the conversations and open, because just because you have a diverse company, so you have lots of different people with different backgrounds and different cultures and perspectives, doesn't mean that they get to actually have any insight on anything and get to have the conversations. When I'm in a room with, 5 other guys and I try to talk and they tell me to be quiet because I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, you're not being very inclusive. You're not including my thought process and my ideas to help with whatever the solution is that we're trying to find, or whatever we're trying to innovate, or the different perspective. So you definitely not only you need to have the diversity, but you also need to have the culture of, we're here to listen and help and grow. And I think a lot of companies get confused on that. And the kind of the interesting thing on it, and I wanted to I did the research because I thought it was important. I feel like a lot of companies look at the bottom line. They're like, okay, well, that's great, we'll do that, but if it's not going to make me money, then I don't really care. So I actually did the research on what happens when you have a more inclusive environment and a better culture. And for every 1% of success in diversity and inclusion, and it has to be both, and equity. It's not just the diversity and inclusion, it's the equity too. I was having a conversation with Nicolette, and she's like, sometimes the companies, they are very diverse, they're trying to be inclusive, but then you don't see people moving up, so they don't have the same equity or not getting the same pay. So you really have to have all 3 components, and they have to be working well. But for every 1% increase in that, you have a 3% increase in revenue. That's huge. And that's just a 1% increase in that effort. So imagine, 10%, that's a 30% bottom line. Now tell me you don't want to do it. You're actually throwing money in the trash if you're not doing it. So I try to come from all different angles on the subject.
Well, and to your point, particularly for large organizations, right? Title matters. We can pretend that it doesn't. We can pretend that we're all equals in the room. We all put our pants on the same way, as the saying goes, whatever. But that's not always reality. And so subtly or unsubtly, and I'm not saying that it always, and it does depend on the corporate culture, but and people take cues from the leader too, right? And so you kind of are looking to the leaders in the room to kind of say, like, what can I say? What can I say? Mm-hmm. What, how much discussion and debate can we have? And so if the leadership doesn't look reflective of the workforce in general, are you going to be able to hear from the full workforce? Do they feel like, hey, I see myself represented, and so I know that my voice counts just as much, right? Because I see that reflected in my leadership team, rather than, well, I can say it, I'm in the room, but at the end of the day, does my voice matter? Right.
Yeah. And it definitely, you're right. It all trickles down. It trickles from the very top to the bottom. So if your middle management's doing a good job, but the layer above them is not, and people get stopped there, well, then, you're not really doing as much good as you would hope. It really has to come from the top and trickle all the way down, and each level needs to embrace it and do it. But typically, if your CEO's doing it and saying, this is what we're doing, everyone's going to do it because that's the way it goes. And so if the CEO is like, I don't really care, just do your job and be quiet, that's the culture that you're creating. If the CEO is like, I want to hear from everybody, I'm going around talking to people, I really care about you, and I'm really trying to make sure everybody grows and is successful, well, then that's the culture that you created. So it really does come from the top and goes down. And the better you do at that, the better the company is. And the more likely it's going to stick around and do well. So, so I'm trying to think. So we kind of talked about also, I think we're getting in on probably like 20 minutes or so right now. And I was thinking that we should talk about what the audience is for our books, because when me and you were talking about it, the people that think they should be reading it and the audience for it is actually very different than what the audience is that we intended for the books and who will get the most benefit out of it. So for me personally, I wrote the book to try to talk to leadership in the insurance world to ask for a change, to say, these are our problems and these are the solutions to the problems. So we have a talent crisis, we have the talent, now let's put it together and make it work together. That was my intention for the book. What has happened though is a lot of men are like, well, I don't need to read that because it's a book for women. And it is for women to not feel alone and see that there's somebody out there trying to speak up for them and trying to help them. And I'm hoping that, and I even prompt in the book a couple times, hand this to your boss. But that's been the perception. Like a lot of women have been attracted to it, wanting to read it. And I think that's fantastic. I definitely want that. But I really want to encourage the men and the leadership to really read it and really keep an open mind. So that's the perception on mine. What's the perception for yours?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, it's for everyone, right? I mean, I have a copy, like undiscovered voices. So to me, it's like, hey, I need to discover these undiscovered voices, particularly like you said, in kind of a leadership. And you and I were talking at your amazing book launch event last month. It's very similar to, like, there's a lot of women in leadership conferences, right? And guess who the companies sponsor to go to that event? All their, high performing females, they may be in a current leadership role, or maybe they're being targeted for a future leadership role. And there's very, very few men. In fact, usually it's like a handful. You can probably count on both hands, right? The number of men. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, this is great that we have this conference, but half of the audience that should be hearing this message isn't here in this room. And it's never going to change unless, hey, a women in leadership conference is everyone should be there, because we should all be invested in that topic. So yeah, I can't emphasize that point that you were just making enough. I know for me, a lot of founders, InsurTech founders, have really gravitated towards the book. And I just came back from a conference in Iowa, and a friend of mine, like, I had dedicated a book to him, and he said it was very, very helpful as they were starting their company, and they're becoming wildly successful, which is great, and they're growing employees. And so he said that he was always handing, like, that was almost like a part of the employee manual. It's like he'd hand my book to these kind of new employees, and I was kind of giving him a hard time. I was like, well, Tom, I think you can buy them their own copy since you guys are starting to make money now.
He's just handing the copy.
Yeah. I should probably, instead of recycling the same one copy throughout the whole company. So it's awesome to kind of hear some of those startups that have really, found value in the book. But definitely insurance professionals as well. I think that's the part, particularly the early part, talks about what's wrong with insurance, right? And so for insurance professionals, they may already know, like, they don't have to understand, hey, why is the deductible kind of a big deal, and et cetera. But the book really kind of dives into not just what's wrong with insurance, but what are some of the technology, what are the opportunity areas, what are some technologies that I think could potentially change the industry, and then how do I see it playing out? And I don't pretend to have a crystal ball, but it really gives you kind of food for thought. And I think for insurance professionals that have taken the time to read it, that's the feedback I get, is you really got my mind going, and they'll say, I agree with this, I don't agree with this, and we engage in a conversation. And I always tell people, it's like, my aim is not to be quote unquote right, it's to get you to think. And so that's the feedback that I've really gotten. So I think just, maybe if there's an audience out there that it hasn't resonated with, or just because I haven't read it yet, it's like, oh, I'm the insurance professional. I already know, right? You're the guy that says it's the end of insurance as we know it. And I always add, hey, it's the as we know it part. So I'm not saying insurance is going away. I'm not that crazy guy, right? But how we've done it is going to change. And I think that's, as we talked about, a common theme of like, hey, the way we've always done it in the insurance industry cannot be the way forward. We have to make changes. And so, like you said, it's like, that's a theme of your book as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the people who are adopters to change, the sooner they become the ones that are relevant. So the ones like, you got your early adopters, your middle adopters, and then your laggers. And the laggers are the ones that are going to hurt from not making innovation changes, not making D&I changes and leadership changes. They're going to wonder, like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not successful like this early adopter who is like, way above me, and I've been in business way longer. They're trying to figure out, like, where's the disconnect? Well, the disconnect is you're not changing. You're lagging. It's like you have the iPhone 8. You don't have the updates.
Well, I know, for many years, kind of working on the carrier side, we would look at data on complaint data, right? Like which policyholders are complaining, what are they saying? Like that's important feedback for us to hear. And then we would look at cancellation data. And then finally, one of our data scientists kind of did a study and realized, hey, guess what? The people that are complaining, they actually stay with us. The people that are canceling, they don't really say anything. They just leave.
Mm-hmm.
And we're missing that. And I think it's the same with women at your company, right? It's like, okay, great. There may be some women that give you some feedback and it may be difficult to hear, but guess what? Like for every woman that has the courage to maybe speak up, there's probably 4 or 5 that are just walking out the door, like don't have anything to do with you. They've just moved on. And so I think you have to look at both. You certainly have to listen to those voices when it does come up, but hey, just by their actions, right? That they're speaking by leaving. And so I think that's important to acknowledge as well. And they may say it's, oh, for family or for this or that, right? They may actually not give you that more candid reason. But I think just the fact that women are leaving your company is something that you really kind of need to dig into and ask around and kind of, hold up a mirror in some sense and just really be candid about like, hey, are the things that we could do to improve so maybe we're able to retain this talent.
Absolutely. So I guess I don't know what ending words we should have, but if you guys haven't checked out Rob's book, it's amazing. He helped inspire my book, and if you haven't checked out my book, I think it's pretty good too. So I hope that you check us both out and just start
on Amazon. Go look
on
now.
Amazon. Yeah, they're both available on Amazon.
You can bundle them together, get it in one purchase.
Yeah, we could figure out a bundle price somehow. And I think Rob is like #1 in the insurance genre on Amazon. So I'm working my way to try to get up there with you. Maybe I'll be #2.
I'm sure you'll leapfrog one day. Absolutely, Sarah. So great to be with you. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.